to our live stream Q&A part two of our hour of Friendly Neighborhood History, answering all of your questions relating to history, social studies, and the like for the next hour. We go live every Friday and Saturday from 6 to 7 Eastern Standard Time, answering all of your questions. We had a session yesterday. We're doing our second part tonight, and I hope you're keeping up your weekend by getting some history questions answered here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have our live stream lecture. You can vote here on YouTube on the topic you would like me to discuss as a historian, bringing you not just answers on Fridays and Saturdays, but an actual topic of actual discussion on Sundays that I think was very enjoyable, and there's usually a little bit of time for Q&A at the very end of that. Our Q&As are very popular, they're very successful, we really like doing them. But welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to our part two of our Q&A, Ask Me Anything About History and Social Studies. And let's see, what background do we want to use today? We're figuring out our background. I hope everybody's having a really good weekend. We'll use this. We'll use something cool. We'll use the Northern Lights as our background. Something nice and, it's not necessarily historical. It's aesthetically very pleasing, but it's not necessarily very historical. We'll use, okay. Let me go through it. Nice historical image. Figuring out what image we're going to use. Oh, I love this one. But I already used that kind of. Let's go with that. I was already doing the French. I'm going to use something a little different. Yesterday we used the French Revolution. So let me see here. What background are we going to use? Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, to our live stream Q&A part 2, where I answer all of your questions in a friendly, neighborly manner for the next hour or so. So if you have a topic about history or social studies you'd like me to answer, please be sure to ask. I'll be happy to answer for you. And we'll use the geishas, the Japanese maidens who were trained just like the samurai and had great military, artistic, and social development, but obviously weren't as much a part of the army, but were an extremely important part of Japanese society in the medieval and early modern period. So hope everyone's doing well. Make sure to like and subscribe. We've got Rodolfo and Harry here. Good to see you guys. Do your parties, like political parties, have party constitutions in America? Yes, they have party platforms. They draft every convention, so every 4 years they come up with a platform, but they also have a basic convention on how that party is supposed to behave in the United States. And yes, YouTube, it's great. I'm glad you joined us at the very beginning. Yes, you can let him spread his nonsense, but this isn't pink. I'm not wearing pink. It's actually white, but oh, you were thinking of the background. So this is so instead of using pink, the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, I'm going to use these are geishas being trained in medieval or early modern Japan. This is wood print art, very woodblock prints, very popular in Japanese art and culture. So we did French theme yesterday. We're doing Japanese theme today. A background is nice. It's appealing. It catches a bit everybody's attention when they come in. So welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we talk about all types of history: the history of Japan, the history of Europe, the history of Asia, the history of Africa, the history of the Americas, in a friendly, neighborly manner. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy history. Drop a topic, comment, or question in the chat, and I will answer it as soon as possible. But Scotland forever? Absolutely. You probably would like my video about Macbeth. I talk a lot about Scottish history. I am American, but I don't share exactly where I am from America. Hello, Ian. Hello, Cam. Hello, Kiara. Always great to see you. We do as much history as we possibly can, but we try to do it in a friendly, neighborly manner. It's going pretty good. Let me see. So does anyone have questions they would like to discuss? Questions about history and social studies, I'll be happy to answer. I hope you're all having a wonderful Saturday. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. For those of you who are new, we're glad that you're here. We're glad that you stumbled across this live stream. We've got long form videos every Monday and Friday dropping, and short form videos every day dropping here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And to my friendly neighborhood historians, those who have liked and subscribed, welcome back. Consider perhaps a super chat or getting a membership for early access. Anything that you donate to the channel and all of our ad revenue goes into building the channel, making things more accessible for all of you, improving our technology, like with our new microphone. Hopefully the microphone is coming in clear and you guys can hear me all right. We've even gotten new lighting and all of that. So things are improving here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and it's thanks to being monetized. It's thanks to having the revenue, and some of that comes from the generous donations and memberships from viewers like you. I know I sound like PBS, and that's because I, like PBS, do the news, but I actually do it fairly and objectively. So What do you think of the Mongol Empire, even though it basically broke into four empires after the death of Genghis Khan? Large, it wasn't after the death of Genghis Khan, I think it was Mongol Khan. But the largest contiguous land empire in history, it was incredible how far they were able to conquer, and if they had kept going, there really wasn't anything to stop them. The Mongols, when they were broken into four constituent kingdoms or khanates, were not really able to expand much more, except for Kublai Khan, who was able to conquer all of China. In 1240, the Mongols basically turned Russia into a fiefdom, forever hampering Russia compared to the rest of Europe, setting it back. So all of it was pretty. The Mongols were an empire. They're the largest contiguous empire in history, but they didn't have the longevity. They were definitely overextended from the beginning, and then they settled into different kingdoms, one in South Asia, one in East Asia, the Mongols in the Golden Horde in Russia that I just mentioned, and of course the Ilkhanate in Persia. So yeah, that was stopped from conquering all the Middle East by the Mamelukes. So there you go. Hopefully, good luck with your selling, Dave. I'm not buying. Yeah, it's geishas. That's our background for today. Japanese handmaidens trained in the artistic styles, in the poetic styles of haiku, but also trained in the same Bushido code of a Japanese samurai. So yeah, can you share freedom of America and their struggle? Which struggle are you referring to? The United States got its freedom from the British in the 1770s. They had this kind of agreement for ever since the colonies had been founded of basically being allowed to operate on their own while paying fealty to the British, and all of their taxes, some of their taxes going towards the British. So there's that as well. But yeah, not much more than that. Eventually, they grew tired of paying different new taxes after the 7 Years' War. This led to a cycle of protests and boycotting. When the British refused to accept their boycotting, it eventually led to the revolution. And thank you, Ian, for the high five. I appreciate that from you. But no, I am not a Navy SEAL. I'm a historian. Yeah, the geishas were incredibly talented, wonderfully loyal, and disciplined people. Tell Trump Putin is not his friend. Okay, you told me to do that last week. I don't talk to Trump, so I don't know what you're saying. And I think he has figured that out. But hello, Perp. Good to see you. I am not a Navy SEAL. Let me see. I swear the Mongols were defeated in India, Japan, and Java. Yes, the Mongols were defeated in Southeast Asia. The Dai Viet and the Khmer Empire did not let them get that far. The Mamelukes defeated them. The Indians, they tried to attack India, but the mountainous terrain, the Himalayas, was not friendly to them. The Indians were able to repel them, although the Mughal were the founder of the Mughal dynasty, was a descendant of Genghis Khan, as was Tamerlane, or they were at least related to the Mongols. So the Mongols had kind of these subsidiary, non-affiliated empires in South Asia, the Timurid Empire in the 14th and 15th century in Afghanistan, and of course the Mughal Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries in India. So the Mongols' influence stretches far. So yes, let's see here. Historical records never depict the supernatural abilities. Genghis Khan had a small army but lots of supernatural abilities. I don't know about that. What they had better than anyone was the perhaps supernatural ability to ride on horseback and fire arrows at their enemies. So, but yeah. You do shipping to Italy? No. Do you know about the Crusades? Yes, I've done plenty of videos, including an entire series of short videos on the Crusades, and talked about them a lot. The Western Europe's attempts to reconquer the Holy Land and stop the Seljuk Turks, later turned into the Abids, the Mamelukes, and other Muslim groups that had taken control of Jerusalem back from the Christians, starting in the 7th century, and then did so again in the 1180s. The only successful crusade was the first one, where the Western Christians were able to reconquer Jerusalem. Putin does admire the Soviet Union. That's definitely true. What makes you think he's a Navy SEAL? Yeah, I don't know where people are going. Let me see. The Brits took a quarter of the planet with possessions. Yeah, about 23.6% of the planet, 25% of the planet was controlled by the British. The sun never set on the British Empire because no matter what continent you were on, there was an area of land in that continent that was controlled by the British. And Hars has my wonderful moderators here, and he's got the social media, so you can follow the Substack to read articles. Patreon has some early access, as well as Instagram, where there's updates and other stuff there as well. So please like and subscribe, become a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. Drop a comment, question, or topic in the chat that you would like me to discuss, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in an amicable, communal manner. Every Friday, Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we answer all of your questions. And Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern, we do a live stream lecture on a topic that you get to vote for exclusively here on YouTube. We also have a TikTok where you get exclusive content there that you don't get here, but there's stuff here that you won't get there. So go and follow our TikTok, Friendly History. Tengrism was followed by both the Turks and the Mongols, yes. People often don't talk about Genghis Khan's religion of Tengrism, the religion of the steppe. Even certain Europeans practiced at one point, Bulgars and Magyars. It was the worship of the god of the sky. It had been popular amongst the Asian state people that had been moving back and forth into Eastern Europe and Eurasia for centuries. But basically the Mongols were tolerant and oftentimes just absorbed the culture and religion of the areas they conquered. The Chinese Mongols consider themselves to be legitimate Chinese emperors. Many of them converted to Buddhism. The Ilkhanate in Persia became a Muslim empire more than a Mongol empire. So the Mongols had this ability to kind of chameleonize them with the culture they were living in. So their religion of Tengrism really didn't have as huge a play on its empire as other empires' religions did. They've also done a form of this by absorbing the cults and different beliefs of their religious regions. The persecution of the Christian church by the Roman Empire wasn't because the Christians were worshiping a god that they didn't like. It was because the Christians chose Jesus Christ as their only god. So there's that. Bosnia forever. Okay. How much the riches of empires actually benefits the ordinary people? The sometimes riches of the empire can be used to benefit the ordinary people. The Romans had their Pax Romana. The British built infrastructure almost everywhere they went. If an empire is wealthy, it has the means not only to protect its citizens, to build a strong army, to build good infrastructure, to trade. That can benefit normal citizens. That can benefit people who are working, who have different jobs. Obviously, the trade-off is those who are in the very lowest parts of society, especially conquered regions, tend to be enslaved and oppressed at very high levels. So, please do not eat radioactive shrimp from Walmart. Thank you. And those shrimp emojis are distracting. You're making me hungry. So yes, another reason why the Romans didn't like Christianity was because it did not recognize Rome as the embodiment state of the religion. Yes, the Christians refused to give the Roman religion any due reverence because they were monotheists. The Romans had a kind of a mutually beneficial agreement with the Jews, who were also monotheists, but basically the Romans did not have any affinity for Christians for that reason. What do you think about this buzz of Sinchil 6 and a failed North Korea invasion? I think it's a fake story. Haven't heard enough about it, but I'm going to say fake story. Woodrow Wilson can be a live stream lecture. That's the potential topic. It's up to you guys to go and vote on it here on YouTube. Whereas the other churches that weren't persecuted, such as the Greek and Roman churches, did recognize Rome as the embodiment state of the religion. That's not true, Harry. Every Christian church at different times throughout the empire's history were persecuted. The only comparable, there were other monotheists, but the only major comparable group of monotheists in the Roman Empire, especially early in Christian history, were the Jews. And the Jews had their own set of understandings. They did not proselytize. So, George, hello. We've got George Washington in the chat. That's always good news. In a multiverse where Japan and Germany won, what would today's world look like? Read Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle. But that's a good alternative history. But basically, the Germans probably would have demanded a huge amount of land from the Soviet Union. They would have dissolved the Soviet Union. They probably would have taken several different British colonies, and they would have forced most of Europe to turn over its Jewish population for continual extermination. States probably would have been handicapped, maybe even forced to give up Hawaii and some of its other Pacific territories under Japanese control. Basically, all of the large would have been under either Japanese hegemony, as well as the communist regimes that came to power in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and China. Myanmar probably would have been split. But these are all guesstimations. I have no idea. Italy probably would have been able to retain a colony in Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie would have been straight out of luck. That's probably what would have happened, assuming that the Axis would have stayed together. They would have been not divided up the world into their own spheres, but definitely had a more hegemonic influence over Eastern Europe with the Germans, Southeastern Europe with Southeastern Asia with the Japanese, and Southwest and the Southern Pacific with the Japanese, and parts of Africa with the Italians becoming more and more dominant in the Balkans. They took over Albania, for instance. People don't know about the Italians and how some could argue that the last World War, what I call World War III, really begins in 1935 when the Italians go into Ethiopia. I think that happens in 1937 when the Japanese attack the Chinese in a false flag operation at the Mutakin Bridge to use that as a pretense to invade the entire country. Hegemonic means able to control certain areas, politics, economy, and political structures without necessarily owning their land. So hegemony is the ability to heavily influence a certain area, not control it, and to let it have its own ostensible governments. It's not like an empire, but hegemonic influence is the ability to have sway over the politics, foreign policy, and economy of a certain area of land. Many would say the United States has a hegemonic influence over North America and Western Europe, for example. Good question, Maverick. Pragmatic adaptation. Professor, thank you for calling me that, but that's very kind. Considering how Tokugawa Ieyasu used marriage alliances and Neo-Confucian ideology to solidify his rule over after Sekigahara, do you think he consciously aimed to make his authority culturally enduring, or was it more pragmatic adaptation? Tokugawa Ieyasu definitely had this idea of preserving Japanese culture. Look at how they repressed Christianity after. This painting probably is from the Edo period, when the capital was moved to Edo, modern-day Tokyo, and the Japanese emperor had no power, and the Ieyasu, the Tokugawa shogunate, rose to power and controlled Japan for nearly 3 centuries. This was in the beginning of the 17th century all the way to the late 19th century, or mid-19th century. But basically, the Tokugawa shogunate was very, very good at closing off Japan to Western influences that had grown in the 16th century from Portugal, the Jesuits, things like that. The only trade they allowed was with the Dutch. So I think that they took Neo-Confucian ideology, they took all of these things, they used it pragmatically, but so controlling and maintaining his culture was a huge goal of Ieyasu and his successors. Where is most likely to become the 51st state? Probably Puerto Rico. Some Roman area, we take for granted how in ancient times every religion was tied to a specific race or people, generally speaking just like Judaism and Shinto still are today. Some Roman area syncretism and such doesn't negate this rule. That's true, and the Romans were actually very good at letting native areas worship their gods as long as that worship didn't conflict with Rome's power and authority. In fact, the Romans themselves were very open to worshiping different gods from different religions. Not only were their gods a copycat in many ways of the Greek gods, but they also developed cults to worship Egyptian gods and Eastern gods and all sorts of things. So the Romans were extremely good at syncretistic religion, and were perfectly fine with people practicing their religious beliefs in their empire as long as they were loyal to the emperor. And for the people of the various polytheistic religions that were predominant in the along the banks of the Mediterranean, worshiping one more god, even if it was the emperor, wasn't going to kill you. The most powerful countries are hegemonic empires where they control their own land across the world and control everyone else indirectly. Yes, like the United States controlling Great Britain. Thank you for proving my point, Harry. Yeah, I've heard that. Felix from Stray Kids. Isn't that the K-pop group? I'm not Korean, but I'll take that as a compliment because he's famous, and for a good reason. What was the Japanese Civil War after the failed Mongol invasion? I don't know a huge amount about it. It might have been the change of the shogunates. The Japanese have had several different civil wars. The Tokugawa shogunate rose through such a civil war. Yes, after the Norman invasion, the British switched from Orthodoxy to Roman Catholicism based in Rome. That is not true. They were already Roman Catholic. Look up Augustine of Canterbury. The British were already very Catholic before that. The British didn't even exist in the 11th century, but I understand what you're saying. Canada or Greenland? Probably not Canada. Greenland is an option for the U.S. to purchase it, and to pretend that this just came out of nowhere, out of Donald Trump's butt, is ridiculous, because it's actually, there's precedent for the United States wanting to control Greenland. They controlled it during the last World War, so I think it's probably Puerto Rico, like people have thought for the last 20 years. Also, the Norman Empire reached its zenith, stretching from Sicily to Scotland. The Normans did not have an empire in the sense. The Normans went to different areas, but it wasn't the Duke of Normandy controlling those regions. The King of England did not control Sicily. how was the first UFO actually found? I don't know when the first UFO was found, but one of the most famous, what really started the modern revolution of UFOs was the Roswell incident, where a UFO crashed in that area in 1947, and people obviously started to wonder what this unidentified aerial phenomenon actually was. Interesting. It was in Jerusalem. No, you do not need to see my footwear. What do you think of the War of 1812? The Americans lost it. Americans need to stop coping so badly with that war. No, America isn't hegemonic anymore. It needs to bully people. A true hegemonic empire doesn't need to bully people. Yes, the British never bullied anyone. Thank you, Harry. That's total nonsense. Hegemonic powers bully people all the time. The Soviet Union did it in Eastern Europe, and the Americans did it with the creation of NATO. Of course, there's cooperation. Of course, there's negotiation. It's not just do what we say, but when you obviously have the power, and you've obviously won the wars, and you obviously have the gold, you get to make the rules. Let me see here. The major schism happened after 1055. It took China and became standardized at 1066. It was 1054 when the major schism happened. But Western Europe was already practicing Latin Christianity, which is basically Catholicism. The break between the Orthodox and Catholics have been going on for a long time. It didn't just happen overnight. I've heard Henry VIII was extremely loyal to the Church, Catholicism, Pope growing up. Why did this change? He was still loyal to it in his own private beliefs. He just believed that it was better for him to retain power. It was better for him to create England as an empire and to break away from the church. It gave him more wealth, it gave him more leeway, and it gave him more power. And why answer to the Pope when he can be the head of the church, but he didn't envision a really strong Protestant church. He just kind of let it be the religious leaders doing their own thing while he secretly still practiced Catholic masses. Easiest sea route to enter the UK now. Ask all the immigrants. It's usually the English Channel. Really isn't, though, because 30% of global transactions in conversible clearing banks still go through London, and London is the second largest financial center in the world behind New York. Yes, did you see what it was behind? It was behind New York. Congratulations, you just played yourself. Do you think Catherine de' Medici's brilliance lay more in ambition or her subtle mastery of perception and power? She understood Catherine de' Medici from the famous Medici family, became the Queen of France in the 1540s. Her husband died. Then she oversaw two different French monarchies and basically waged the French wars of religion on her own as the most powerful person in France throughout the mid-16th century. Basically, Catherine de' Medici just knew how to play people off of each other and was very, very good at holding on to power, but was terrified of losing it, and that's what led to things like the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre at her hands. Yeah, no, they don't go back and forth, Harry. So, yes. It started from the minor schism with Nestorians and Monophysite controversy. No, that's not where it started either. There were already breaks within the Christian church before the Catholic Orthodox break. And the Orthodox were not Monophysites, and they were not Nestorians, and neither were the Catholics. Bosnia owned all of Asia, but they were kind enough to give a land to the Asian people. Except that's not true. I haven't said Britain was hegemonic because it really wasn't. Britain relied most of the time on influence and threats. Yes, that's called bullying. And they did have hegemonic influence. Look at what it did in China. Were the bourgeois evil? They were certainly extremely manipulative and power hungry. They aren't any different in many ways than other European families. Noble families in Italy obviously had a lot of attention paid to them because Italy was not united as a country. It did not have kingdoms, but it had city-states that were extremely influential, and the more power and influence and money you had in these city-states, the more of a powerful figure you were. You also had a close relationship with the Pope that was extremely essential being in Italy, and the Papal States were their own little kingdom anyways. So the Pope was actually a landholder and often a general in the medieval and early modern period as opposed to today. But the bourgeois were known for being pretty corrupt, and one of them became a pope. Whereas America threatens, acts on threats because no one really cares, and then after a couple of weeks gets what it wants. Huh? Whereas America threatens, acts on threats because no one really cares what it cares, then it gets what it wants. Well, that part was true. Henry VIII considered himself a Catholic of the day, but said didn't recognize the authority of the Pope. Yes, that's true. What was the Ohio Gang? You're going to have to jog my memory. I don't remember off the top of my head. Your thoughts on Taiwan now being known as Chinese Taipei. There's this back and forth between China believing Taiwan belongs to China. It has a history with Taiwan, obviously, and Taiwan considering itself to be its own continuation of a nationalist government that China established after the fall of Paiyu, the last Chinese emperor, in 1911. How dare you disrespect Bosnia? I love Bosnia, but I don't love counterfactual history. How did Central and Western Europe evolve so fast technologically after the Dark Ages to be able to conquer the Americas? It's a great question. The Dark Ages never happened. There was definitely a period of social disruption, adjustment, and political breakdown after the Roman Empire. The church filled many of these voids, particularly spiritually, but rising tribes eventually created kingdoms, and with the rise of the Carolingians taking over from the Merovingians in France, the Holy Roman Empire being the seat of power in Central Europe, and eventually the Norman Conquest, which brought England into the mix with all of its wealth and power into the mix of European affairs, and the Reconquista. Despite a bumpy few centuries between about 476 and 800, the Viking Age obviously was a huge deterrent to this as well. But Europe, through Christianization, through mutual social interests, and through economic development and the creation of a strong feudal structure, that lasted in France until its revolution. For the most part, Europe was actually did not have the Dark Ages the way we think of them as this backwards time. The Crusades brought Eastern learning. The fall of the Ottoman Empire made Europe the defensor fide of all Christians. The Orthodox and Byzantine refugees sparked learning and influenced Western Europe. The Renaissance brought new economic measures such as modern banking invented by the Medicis, talking about Italy. By the Renaissance, scientific discoveries and a desire to trade in different ways using new technologies such as faster ships like carracks, rather than trade through the Middle East to get to the Silk Road to get to China and India. The Europeans devised models of moving on ships to do this, and using faster carracks and better ships, they were eventually able to go west with Columbus and get to the Americas. So technology is really where it's at. When you consider the whole swathe of European colonization, oppression, and imperialism, technology is the only thing that allowed them to do this. Any other society probably would have done something very comparable had they had the technological prowess of the Europeans starting in the late 15th century. But that technology developed out of a feudal system that was starting to change, economic development, social changes after the Black Death. It's a great question. It's a complex question. There's a lot of answers, but to say that Europe was stuck in the Dark Ages and then all of a sudden became rich because they landed in America is reductive. The Europeans were stuck in a transitory time, started to progress and change. The Dark Ages, the Black Death made things extraordinarily difficult for them, but changed their social currency, where peasants, farmers, and those who had died off in larger numbers were now much more needed. Labor gained a lot of value. Social and economic changes, the invention of banking, and new discoveries and technologies made international commerce, intercontinental commerce, much more important to the Europeans. But after the fall of Constantinople, they became much more interested in finding other ways to trade and to settle and to colonize, and that eventually would lead them westward. Henry VIII considered himself... Oh, I already answered that. Well, officially, Gnostics and Bogoism were not considered Christian like Arianism and Manichaeism, too. Yes, Arianism was a form of Christianity that denied the divinity of Jesus and had it out with Orthodox Christianity, traditional Christianity during the 4th century. The thing about Warren Harding. Oh yeah, that was a group of Warren Harding's political associates who were known for corrupt economic interests, including his Secretary of Commerce. Some of them got involved in buying off oil fields, in investing in oil fields that I believe were bought from government land in the Teapot Dome area, I think in Wyoming, and this led to one of Harding's worst scandals. Hey, how much are you spending a month on? I'm not spending anything. Were the Borgias married off to royal houses? Yes, many of them were. One of them even became a pope. Alexander VI. Would you do something on Yugoslavia war, a live or video, anything really? I'd be happy to do stuff on Yugoslavia and talk about it. I just need to learn a little bit more about it. If you want to talk to me about particular topics or make suggestions or give me more information, you can email me, friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com, and we can have a more lengthy back and forth that I would really enjoy. Great to see you, Freshly. I've got such great moderators. I've got Freshly, I've got Harry, I've got Hars holding down the chat. Always a pleasure. Hello, Anson. Don't spam the chat, but it's good to have you here. Thank you so much. Yeah, Harding died pretty badly, and who knows exactly how he died. And British banks are considered some of the most stable and responsible banks to bank with. Banks in New York have a good reputation for making you a lot of money. I'll go with a lot of money. Normandy was more wealthy than England. Kind of. Not fully, though. Do you think Tito was a bad guy, was a good guy, or awesome? Yeah, I think he was. I think he obviously leading the partisans to victory against the Germans is no mean feat, and he managed to do that pretty incredibly. And then he managed to unite all of the different peoples of Yugoslavia, and by that was just able to basically win their trust and live as a benevolent dictator until his death. He also resisted Stalin and threatened to assassinate Stalin. So he had the guts to stay out of a Cold War, to stay non-aligned, even though he was a communist. Yeah, Tito was a pretty bad guy. In a good way. Other than the fact that he's still kind of a brutal dictator, you got to give him credit for what he was successful with. What was the 30 Years' War? The 30 Years' War is one of the last major religious wars in European history. It served different functions. Basically decided that eventually became a war about statehood and nations within Europe, and eventually laid the foundations for creating modern nation states with the Peace of Westphalia, which ended in 1648. In 1618, representatives from the Holy Roman Emperor, who was Catholic, the Habsburgs, were thrown out of a window in Prague, the defenestration, where people throw someone out of a window, by Bohemian or Czech Protestants. This led to a war where the Austrians and the Holy Roman Empire attacked the Bohemians, who were part of the Holy Roman Empire. The Bohemians got help first from the Danes and later the Swedes. Eventually, the French came into the war, and the war became about political power between the Catholic French and the Catholic Habsburgs, then about the Swedish, who were Protestants fighting against Catholics. So it was a war that started off as Catholic v. Protestant, but eventually became a war that was more about nation states and political power and centralization in Europe. It led to the rise of France as the predominant political power in Europe at the time. Spain, it allowed the Dutch to finally get their full independence from Spain in 1648, and basically ended the wars of religion of the 16th century. Sicily was kind of wealthier, yeah. Whereas British banks have a good reputation for making you get more money over time, and your money is very secure. I don't care. Yes, Harry, we all know. Britain better than America. Got it. What was the single worst decade the United States of America ever made? Or the single worst decision the United States of America ever made? Probably the Vietnam War. But then again, the War on Terror is a close one. You've also, of course, got the reservation system and the schools where they forced Native Americans into horrible conditions. Thanks, James. Thanks for guessing my race before asking anything about history. I appreciate that, I guess. So American banks make more money, British banks hold more money and hold it for longer. Yeah, America's richer. We got it, Harry. In examining the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, I keep wondering, as Catherine de' Medici calculated architect terror did the chaos reveal that even the most informed rulers are ultimately at the mercy of historical forces they claim to control? No, I just think she wanted to kill Protestants. China wasn't hegemonic. We relied heavily on European powers. No, you didn't. You were the ones who called the shots in China, and then the other Europeans came in and did their own thing, and then you created spheres of influence, and the United States stopped you from doing that because of the Boxer Rebellion. That's actually what happened. You had to get the French to help you. No, you can't win wars on your own. But yes, Harry. The British definitely had hegemonic influence in China, other parts of Africa, and look at the Commonwealth system. Look at the post-colonial world the British created. That's definitely hegemonic. So China, India at first was extremely hegemonic thanks to the British East India Company. I can go down the list about how hegemonic the British have been. Hegemony is not just this area is influenced by us. It's that we are the predominant force in this area, even compared to the native nation state, and that was certainly the case in China in the late 19th century. Yes, the Germans and the French and the Americans were there too in different capacities, but the British were the ones who had done it first and for the longest. And you also can look at how the British weaved their way into India, playing off Rajas against each other, especially based on the trade and the influence of the East India Company. There is no doubt that the British had a hegemonic influence on India before finally just deciding to conquer all of it. You can also make that case with the post-colonial Commonwealth that it created with countries like Canada and New Zealand. Could you do a live stream on Mikhail Gorbachev? That would be a fun one. That's a good idea. What is your Starbucks order? It depends what kind of mood I am. If I don't care about my calories that day, I'm doing a frappuccino, something cold and icy, but usually an iced latte, 2% milk. Normans also had good allies with indigenous Britons, Welsh as well as others, as the Armenians during the Crusades. Kind of. I'm not sure how true that is. Liberia was under American hegemony, for example. That's a little bit more American. Religion debating. It happens on the channel. People ask questions about religion, so. What happens when a diaspora returns home only to find they are now the foreigners in their own ancestral land? What's happening right now? That's a very leading question, Keanu, so please specify what you actually mean, because we all know what you're really talking about. What do you think about martial arts war arts from all over the planet, and based on the history and styles, would you ever want to take this one up? I've done martial arts, but what's really cool is martial arts start in China and East Asia, Korea, Japan, mainly for the purpose of discipline, training, and being able to protect yourself even when your weapon is taken away from you. But there's huge amounts of meditation, breathing, self-control. Discipline is a way for a warrior to use every part of his body, even when he or she sometimes when he or she does not have a weapon handy, in order to do that. And the Japanese certainly were masters as it, and you can see from my wonderful background today of these beautiful geishas with one of their masters. But good question, Scarface. Good to see you again. I agree Sicily is probably broke now, but in modern times. Yeah, people underestimate how influential Sicily was. The Muslims, the Italians, the French, the Habsburgs, and the Normans all controlled Sicily at different points in history. Even the Byzantines controlled Sicily. So you look at the history of Sicily between about 1000 and about 1500, you have many different nations trying to control it at many different times for many different reasons. And welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, to our live stream Q&A. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. If you feel led, you can give a donation, you can become a member. Any money you give the channel helps it with our technology. We use it to purchase stuff and to improve the quality of the content that we produce for you guys. Do you think Americans relocating Canada or Britain is advisable? I get the feeling they don't want Americans living there. Yes, and they have for a long time. It's kind of like the Texans in Texas saying they don't want Californians there because they think they're going to be liberal Democrats. Do you think Hong Kong can conquer the whole world? No. As wonderful as Hong Kong is, it's not going to conquer the own world. It can't even get its own freedom. Americans are welcome as long as they don't bring their guns. Don't think they have nearly the rights and have European. Don't think they have nearly rights and have European common sense. Yes, Harry is inviting all the Americans to come, granted that they give up their rights. That is why a lot of Americans want nothing to do with other countries. So on the one end, you have Americans who are very frustrated with their own government becoming more conservative, so they want to go to countries that are far more liberal, even though those countries are about to become more conservative. Not Canada, but Britain per se. And at the same time, you have the people in America who are supporting the more conservative shift of the Trump administration being more isolationist and just hating other societies. So you lose the people who enjoy other societies, while accumulating people. Well, the people who hate those societies or hate what they stand for become more and more volatile. And there's many isolationists and Trump supporters who obviously love other European countries and areas. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's an interesting cycle of change going on in the United States, where you have people who are more prone to want to adapt certain practices of other countries leaving, while you have people who want to be more independent, staying, and becoming more powerful. So yeah, what are your thoughts on privatization of warfare weaponry industry? I think it's okay. Hello, good to see you. Crispus Atticus. Yes, the guy Crispus Atticus, the one African American gentleman who was killed in the Boston Massacre. We can't win wars on our own. Are you joking? Should we go through America's record on this except for the Revolutionary War, the Mexican-American War, what war of the Civil War, the Spanish-American War? Yes, I just named several. Desert Storm. America would have won that war without you guys. We don't need you guys. And you sometimes don't need us. Because Romans busted up ancient Israel, isn't it true that Italians owe respectful reparations to both Palestinians and especially Israelis? No. We talked about this yesterday. I'm not a reparations guy. And I'm not on about one of your petty interventions. I'm on about an actual war. Yes, our petty interventions that kept you guys from losing to the Nazis. Our petty interventions that kept you guys from losing to the Kaiser. Our petty interventions that, that actually stabilized China rather than creating chaos. Yes. Hi, Rod. Good to see you. I agree. When it comes to India, we definitely were hegemonic there. The British have been hegemonic. Every superpower has been hegemonic. This is what I don't like, Harry. It's not that I dislike what you say about Britain. It's that you pretend that Britain is in this special category that nobody else has ever been in, and therefore we have to judge Britain differently. No. Britain has done just the same amount of crap as everybody else. In fact, they've done more than everyone else because they have the largest empire in the world. So say, oh, the British, all of the people in our colonies were better off, so it doesn't apply to us. No, the British did the same levels of oppression, not maybe as the Belgians, but certainly as the French. In fact, were more oppressive than the French to the Native Americans at the very least. Look at the French-Indian War. Look at who the Indians sided with. The truth of the matter is, if you go down, it's not that I dislike the British, it's that I dislike anyone who's going to claim that their country is in a special category all by itself and cannot be criticized because of that. America is different because it didn't create as much of a large land empire. But when I say that to you, your constant response is to tell me, oh yeah, that's because the Americans aren't good at it. Well, good at what? Colonizing, enslaving, and oppressing native peoples because they think that they're racially inferior and that white people are better than them? I mean, the Americans certainly have a record of doing that. Don't get me wrong. Anyways, Dark History Channel over. Privatization of housing stock is cool by the government, but defense is controversial. Hello, Otter. Good to see you. However, New Zealand more didn't want independence, and so was content with just the Commonwealth system. When it first was invented, Britain was only hegemonic because of a system known as imperial preference. I thought Britain wasn't hegemonic. Like, uh-oh. Do you think the Balts during the Northern Crusades knew the Germans and others used to be pagan like them? Probably not. I think they were just trying to maintain their lifestyle. And thanks to Alexander Nevsky, they partially were able to. Happy Saturday. Hey, everyone. Hey, Daniel. Good to see you. Harry, I don't like the USA, so I'm going to bash them on everything, even though I'm extremely biased, Brent. Yes, it's this, and we all love Harry, but I hate the double standard that Britain doesn't, and it's the French, he puts the French, but it's usually the Americans because he knows I'm an American with an American historian. It's the British did all of these bad things, but not like the Americans, and here's why we're different. No, that's called special pleading. You have rights in the UK, it's just they're not inalienable and they are at the discretion of Parliament. That means your rights come from the government. That is abhorrent to many Americans. However, the Balts lacked resource and wealth until the rise of the Hasianic League. Yes, that's true. Do you think Syria really had weapons of mass destruction? No. However, there is such a thing, a law that is considered constitutional, but that is merely a convention. There's no actual special status for it, which is why a lot of Americans will never live in Britain. Actually, if I wasn't living in America, I would live in Britain. Because I love Britain, I love its history, I love so many things about it. The irony is I would choose to live in Britain, but not because my rights come from the government there, because of the shared history with it in the United States. Do you think the recent unrest in Indonesia is driven more by immediate economic grievances or by deeper systematic issues? Indonesia has been struggling for a long time. It obviously has a legacy of colonialism. It got its independence thanks to Sukarno. It was like Vietnam and Myanmar, occupied at least partially by the Japanese during the last World War, then got its independence at the end of that war. And the Japanese and immediately demanded independence like Myanmar, India, and Vietnam. And it ended up getting its independence, I think in 1949 the Dutch finally left. Of course, you have a post-colonial struggle, you have an extremely large population, you have several different islands, you have a huge poverty rate, you have climatological factors, tsunamis and devastation. I don't think hurricanes, no, monsoons. So Indonesia is in a difficult place geographically, it's in a difficult place historically. So I think there's deeper systematic issues there, to be sure. The Wends were attacked first by the Saxons as they are wealthy. Yes. Are we starting a book club by the background setting? I guess it's going to be Memories of a Geisha, the first book we're going to read. That'd be awesome to do. It'd be fun. That'd be something for a members-only live, and if we get more members on the channel, if you guys join for a monthly fee, we can do members-only lives, we can do members-only book clubs, we can do members-only chats, we can do a lot of different things. Members also get early access and extra videos, so please consider becoming a member. Super chats also help the chat. All the money that you put into the channel goes into making the channel better, so eventually it's for you guys. But yeah, that'd be a fun thing. A book club would be awesome, James. So consider becoming a member so we can get that book club started. And the Supreme Court cannot block the law for it violating so-called constitutional laws. It can only issue this. Yes, we know. Britain better than USA. I've heard enough. Let me see here. There. Friendly history. Why is your view mitigating the high amount of negative actions Wilson did, but amplifying the low amount of negative actions Johnson Buchanan did? That's useless and disingenuous. No, I've already explained this. I'm not going to explain it to you again. I didn't come here to fight with my moderators all the time. You're supposed to be helping me. Didn't the Wends team up with the Charlemagne against the Saxons when both were still pagan? I think they might have. I'm not 100% sure. When Jewish diasporas returned to Iberia from the Middle East and Mediterranean, they first alienated, just like new Christians like myself. Blame the Inquisition or Alejandro decree? Both. The Spanish were totally intolerant of the Jews and used the Inquisition to carry it out. America didn't do that. They didn't exist by then. What are you talking about? Is it Americans' duty to be the police of the world, or should we be isolationists, or thread the needle and try to be something in between? There's different results when both of those things happen. The United States obviously had a great amount of success during both world wars in helping Western Europe defeat the Germans. However, at the same time, the United States also has stuck its foot in its mouth more times than it can possibly count, and overestimated itself fighting ridiculously ineffective wars in Afghanistan and Vietnam. The United States has a mixed track record when it comes to being the police of the world, and seem to be in a better shape when the world comes and asks them to do it rather than them insisting that they need to do it. And I'm sure Harry could agree with it. And America couldn't handle imperialism or empire, as proven by Panama and the Philippines. What? Bro, you crazy. Hey, isn't this Harry Day anyways? Because as soon as they get out the Philippines, they were granting self-rule and basically setting it on a path of independence. Yes, it's terrible to let native peoples rule themselves, Harry. Is that what you're saying? Because that sounds what you're saying. Remember, being a national socialist is hard for you. Why do you think in Latin America Spain is still blamed for its economic problems and accused of destroying its culture, when in reality other countries are far more devastating? Spain is blamed because of a legacy of colonization. Obviously, what the Spanish did in the Encomienda system was horrible to the natives. The natives died off from disease, and African slaves were brought, and you created a tier system where any white person who intermarried with Indians or with blacks were considered to be inferior, and the Indians and the blacks were considered to be inferior just as is. So you obviously had centuries of discrimination and hardship similar to the United States in some ways, and Spain is blamed for that because that was their imperial sandprint compared to the British in Africa and the French in West Africa and Indochina and things like that. And Panama was just a temporary thing that they were going to give back anyway. No, they weren't supposed to give it back. Jimmy Carter gave it back. That is not true. Let me see. One can argue America never wanted to be a police of the world, but Europe was in such shambles that it was forced to play that part. Yeah, one of those people who's arguing that is not Harry. Actually, none of the people that are arguing that is Harry. Other countries, especially Europeans, stand on their own 2 feet. They are not our responsibility, especially when they are such whiny babies. I don't see it that way. And I mean, that if the French had taken that attitude in 1778, the British would have destroyed the American Revolution. Yes, the British. Yes, it's called symbiote. It's called symbiotism. It's called working together. It's called what you're not doing right now, Harry. There was an American diplomat who said, "We do not like the British Empire, but it is convenient whenever there is a country we want to stabilize. The British usually have an island nearby." That's true. Very, very true. And yes, now you're finally doing your job. Bring up Woodrow Wilson, and he has an aneurysm and a stroke. You mean like Woodrow Wilson did? Is that because, are you trying to be cute by mentioning that Woodrow Wilson had an aneurysm and a stroke when he was president? Very, very, very funny. No, I don't have an aneurysm and a stroke. I've made this very clear. I've answered this over and over and over and over and over again. Andrew Johnson destroyed Reconstruction. He ruined Lincoln's project. He allowed the KKK to rampage through the South. Woodrow Wilson didn't do anything that bad. James Buchanan allowed the southern states to secede. He did nothing to stop them. He failed to keep the Union together, and he basically caused a civil war. Those two things, right there. And Buchanan did a bunch of other terrible things when he was president anyways. Wilson was just president a lot longer. There's a lot more attention on him because he lived in a much more modern age. So there's a lot more to write and say about it. But Johnson and Buchanan, who both served half the time that Wilson did far more worse things. Just to point out, it was America in 1999 that wanted Europe to stay dependent on America for defense. That's true. Americans are flighty. And yes, it can get very boring and sad. Thank you, Neil. This might be your first time, but you're really lighting it up. I really appreciate it. And it was America who set up the system of everyone tell America about your problems and they're going to fix it. Yes, I know. And thanks to that, it worked. It's, the Atlantic Charter, Churchill begging Roosevelt to help, the A-bomb, Dresden. Oh wait, you guys did Dresden. Never mind. Is relative American decline inevitable as the world develops, and is it heyday basically a consequence of being unscathed in World War II? What I consider to be World War III. I wouldn't say that necessarily. We'll see. America's cultural decline is not because it might have peaked in the 1940s and 50s. There definitely is this sense on both political sides of steep cultural decline in the United States, and nobody knows why. I mean, you sort of put yourselves into mess, and now you don't like it that it's costing you a lot of money, and you want to get out of it. Yes, Harry. Yes. The British have never done that. Like, the United States, for example, or, India, or, let's see, all the wars and rebellions you guys had to fight in Africa. Yeah, Britain's never had that problem. Let me see here. Okay, now my moderators are fighting with themselves. It's just ridiculous. We're actually repeating the Revolutionary War in the chat. We are. And just like in the real Revolutionary War, the Brits are losing. We're the fourth largest military spender in the world, and we have one of the largest networks of allies in the world. And you have, and yes, and that's why your prime minister is universally beloved. Your political stability is strong, and your own people can't put up flags of your own country. Yikes! And I finally caught up. And I finally caught up to the chat. Then they blame Sikhs. Interesting. I think the whole world depends on Bosnia, but whatever. Finally someone, the voice of reason. Yeah. So anyways, anyone have any, bring Sunak back? I don't think anyone wants Sunak back. I don't know what Harry's opinion on Rishi Sunak, I think was his name, but I think everybody hated him. Everybody hated the Conservatives in Britain by the time they left power. It's not that the Labour, it's that the two parties that have dominated British politics are both in serious decline. And that's why the Reform Party is probably going to take it next time. Oh, I'm sorry. We had been fighting a world war for 3 years and needed your help because you guys decided to show up late as always. Oh, I'm sorry. Your society would have probably been at the heel of a maniacal dictator who demanded the extermination of all your Jews and all your communists and all your homosexuals and all your people with disabilities if the United States had not stepped in. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're wrong. Your response is like you saying a hurricane wasn't that bad because it was longer and the tornado was worse. I just don't think he's a hurricane. I think he's a summer storm. I think he did some bad stuff, and he's obviously not a great president. I'm not putting him as below as those two. I'm sorry. I'm not changing my mind. I'd like you to stop asking me about this. Because every time I don't agree with what you think. You presuppose your position to be the correct one. And then when I don't disagree, and when I explain exactly why I think that way, you don't actually have a response to say, Nate, okay, fine, I'll let you do this. Tell me what Woodrow Wilson did that was worse than the Civil War, than allowing the Union to split or allowing the KKK to rampage the South. Tell me what was worse. Tell me what was worse that Woodrow Wilson did than the War on Terror, than destroying the American economy in the 1970s, than ruining America's allies in the Middle East. Tell me what was worse than that. The Federal Reserve, he showed a racist movie in the White House. Oh, that's really bad. Guess who? He showed the racist movie about the KKK in the South. Yes, we all know that. Guess who allowed the KKK to be created? A president who was also a Democrat and also far worse. I'm sorry, Ars. You're not going to win this one. You're entitled to your opinion, but I don't see myself changing my mind. I want you to name one thing Woodrow Wilson did that was worse than anything I've mentioned that Buchanan, Johnson, Bush, or Carter did. Because for me, those are the bottom four. And I'm going to put Wilson ahead of him. I'm sorry. You've helped me see a lot of problems with Woodrow Wilson, but I'm just not going to believe that everything. You've demanded that I show you good things about Woodrow Wilson. Now I'm demanding you to show me something just as bad as causing a civil war that killed hundreds of thousands of people. Whenever you need something, just call a Bosnian. Okay, we'll call you addict. You all are having quite the debate in this chat today. I don't want to interfere. I just don't understand why my own moderators decide that it's the best thing for them to do to fight with me all the time when I'm trying to answer people's questions. It was an interesting example of tokenism symbolism. Rishi Sunak was a prime minister. He was going to keep the ship stable. He was going to make it better or worse. He wasn't going to make it better or worse. Just sort of kept it in the gutter and leave it. Well, thank God Nigel Farage will be different. Right, Harry? I know you're looking forward to Nigel Farage. And I'm going to move over because I'm at 1%, so I'm going to charge the phone. So my quality of productivity is going to go down a little bit. But we've got about 10 minutes left, so if you got a question about history or social studies, drop it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer. Yeah, let's see here. Okay, so I always thought Beckett and the East India Company soldiers were cool in Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They were the bad guys. Let me see. I mean, we had an opportunity to get out of the war in 1940. It's just we didn't want to let him, genocidal maniac, kill millions of people, and we wouldn't have been forced. That's not an argument. Was it 271 or 6 million? It was 6 million. I go with the official story on that. I know a lot of people don't agree, and this is the internet where people can hide behind faceless names and make statements about numbers. I think people should be allowed to have that debate about how many people actually died during the Holocaust, but I think that it's pretty settled for the most part. Woodrow Wilson did something no president has ever done before. Woodrow Wilson took an extremely outdated view and took it into the modern great security and used his outdated view to hurt the country. I would argue that that popular sovereignty by 1857 was outdated, and James Buchanan still tried to force states to ignore their own popular sovereignty and violated his own democratic principles.
I'd say that slavery was outdated probably by 1800, at the very least. And yet you still have presidents fighting for slavery, like James Buchanan, who was against slavery personally, but still wanted Kansas to adopt a slave-loving constitution. I think I think nullification, secession, all of these things were terribly out of date by the time you get to the late 19th century, to the mid 19th century. Yes, you'd think that I put Woodrow Wilson in S tier. That's true. Okay, you think Carter was bad? Yes, I think Carter was bad. Because you're clever and you know what you're talking about, so it's sort of fun to debate with you. Yes, you do know what you're talking about too, so it's fun to debate with you. But I mean, I didn't make you guys moderators to argue with me all the time. You don't have to agree with my perspectives, but you at least have to respect them. And calling me disingenuous for having a perspective that's different than yours, and basically burying your head on the sand on another issue is not respect. It sort of is the idea that Britain was totally reliant on being bailed out is incorrect. That is true. We could have got out of the war and chose not to. Yes, and then you needed the Americans. Buchanan was in an age of slavery. It still existed, was just widely unpopular. Woodrow Wilson was so out of place, it isn't even funny. So, again, Hearts, I don't think you're going to make a good argument here because, again, you have a president who played a racist film in the White House. It was horrible. It's not a good thing at all. I'm not a Woodrow Wilson fan. Then you have a president who created the organization that movie was about and allowed it to exist even after the slaves were freed. I don't know which one's worse, but it's the second one. Oh, wait, I do know which one is worse. It's the second one. I don't know about the Tootsie cleaning. That's not all Woodrow Wilson did. Yes, I know that's not all he did, but he's not as bad as James Buchanan. When he caused a civil war and killed hundreds of thousands of people for no reason whatsoever, and the United States didn't win that war, well, the United States didn't win that war because he wasn't president, then we can talk. In that day and age, it was not considered racist. No, Birth of a Nation was racist in 1915. It was clearly making overtones to the South and demonizing anything in the North. It wasn't just, it was bad. Wilson was badly out of date even by his own standards. But remember, Woodrow Wilson was born in the Confederacy, lived in the Confederacy. He was born right before the war. He had extremely racist views. He was raised by a racist father, and he grew up in Virginia. Being in New Jersey came later in his life. So, yeah. James Buchanan never had a wife. It's actually because he supposedly broke a young woman's heart, refused to get married to her, and she didn't take her own life, but she got sick and died, and he blamed himself. Yes. Not you, but most Americans. So you decide to target a channel that you are a moderator of and use that platform of a moderator to just bash Americans and put Britain on a scale that nobody else, not even a good British historian, would do. Thank you for using my platform for the wrong purposes. Yes, you put people in timeout who don't deserve to be put in timeout. Thank you. Red Summer, Birth of a Nation played. Caused forgotten depression. It wasn't a depression. It was an economic recession. It happened at the end of the war. Recessions typically happen at the end of wars. That is an overwhelming exaggeration. Micromanagement was slow to act. Yes, he was. I know all of those things are bad. They are not as bad as the Civil War. Not even combined. Not even combined times 10. Not even combined times 20. There. Confusing war stance in 1916. Yes, I know all of this. Yes, lied about itself. I'm very well aware. I don't care. That is not good enough. I'm sorry. I think, and by the way, all the historians agree with me. And I'm not going to use an argument from authority because I don't always agree with all the historians myself. But the overwhelming consensus is that James Buchanan is a significantly worse president than Woodrow Wilson. And Andrew Johnson is worse. Most historians believe Nixon is worse. Most historians believe George W. Bush is worse. Most historians believe that Martin Van Buren, who caused the first economic recession, is worse. A lot of people would put, there's many people, I mean, the vast majority of historians love Woodrow Wilson, but I think all of those things are fair criticisms of Wilson. I'm just not going to worship hating him like apparently everybody else is obsessed with. And I'm not doing a live stream lecture on him tomorrow. I'm getting so tired of talking about this man. Allowed his wife to run the country more. He had no choice to do that. Hated Lincoln and thought Washington was out of touch. Yes, so do most people, at least nowadays. Wanted to alter the government and the Constitution. Yes, because no U.S. president has ever altered the government and the Constitution. Keep going. You skipped 11, by the way. Pushed dissent during World War I. Yes, he did falsely jail Eugene Debs. That's true. Pushed for the KKK to rise and turned a blind eye to their violence, leading to the Red Summer. Yes, that's true. Do you know who created the KKK or allowed them to be created and then let them run on a rampage so bad that it set back civil rights 20 years after a war brought it forward 20 years that killed 700,000 people? Andrew Johnson, who got impeached. Did Woodrow Wilson get impeached? I don't think so. I mean, no, I'm not going to I don't want banned trolls. Why are the people that I'm arguing with supposed to be the people helping the channel? Let me see here. Does anyone have questions about history and social study? Don't be racist. British ultra-nationalist is rich, not going to lie. Yes, I would. I mean, there's a lot to be proud of with British history. It's quite fascinating. I would never love Hassan to maybe only 3 and 4. Refused to compromise with Congress. Created the devastating Federal Reserve. I don't know if 14 is not true. And at the very least, if you're referring to the League of Nations, many presidents have been in the exact same boat. And many good presidents have been. Segregated the U.S. government in an area. Yes, those are bad things. Those are bad things. Segregated the U.S. government. Didn't ever publicly talk about the influenza epidemic. That's not something that politicians did back then. Red Scare and Palmer raids. Yes. Woodrow Wilson was not a great president. I agree with you. Move on. We're going to have to agree to disagree. I've been very nice about all of this, but I don't want to talk about it anymore. Acted like a dictator and had a messiah complex, wanting him to run for a 3rd term when he wasn't capable of it. Yes. Yeah. Again, these are things that affect many presidents, many of the best American presidents. Theodore Roosevelt wanted another term, for crying out loud. Yes. Americans do love the Brits. They just don't love Brits who are constantly telling them about how great Britain is and how bad America is. Thank you, Agent Smith. I appreciate someone from the Matrix telling me what to think. What is the best state in the Union? I'm not going to say. Wilson was a con artist, and that is why he wasn't impeached. That's a bad faith argument if I've ever heard one. I would go to America with the 50,000 compensation. Fair enough. I want trolls to be deleted. If they keep trolling, I want them to be timed out. But if somebody's just saying hi and not doing it right, don't just knock them out. Tell them to stop, and if they don't stop, then knock them out. Why do I have to tell you how to moderate? The film was not racist, and you are incorrect. Okay, you can argue with Harris about how great you think Woodrow Wilson is. So the federal and anti-federal relationship that we have now is pretty much the same from back in the Lincoln days. Pretty much. Kind of, but not as bad. Which tanks do you like? Thank you, Kitty Cat. Thank you. Finally, we can get back to the history. Shermans, Panzers, typical World War III stuff. If America was a Khanate, it would be the Orange Horde right now. That's funny. What information do you have on Lyndon B. Johnson? One of the most controversial presidents in American history, beloved for many of his domestic policies, such as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which he did for more political purposes than anything else. However, were obviously huge steps forward in civil rights, created Medicare and Medicaid, tried to unleash a series of domestic changes known as the welfare state that have had mixed results to some extent, and of course, but is lambasted for his deeper intervention with the U.S. in Vietnam. Theodore Roosevelt would have only been elected to his 2nd term as the 1st term. Yes, and he wanted to keep running. Don't be naive. He had already been president for 8 years. Ignoring the facts and saying you don't care is selective loyalty on your end. I give you the facts and listen to it and critique you yourself. I do listen to it. I agree with some of the facts. I'm not saying they're not true. I'm saying it still doesn't I'm still not seeing anything Civil War-ish. I'm still not seeing anything as basically letting the Ku Klux Klan be created, is not upholding the Constitution. It's getting impeached. I'm not seeing that. You are not trolling. I really appreciate you being here, Shanil. Could be the Reconquista. Finally, something that's not Woodrow Wilson from you. That's a good one. I will entertain Woodrow Wilson as a topic, but I want to be allowed to talk about him fairly and reasonably. I'm not a huge Woodrow Wilson fan. I am on the cutting edge of historians when it comes to Wilson criticism. Harson, you're just in madness about him. It's just what's the word? Mania. There. 1 second, I let the guy say hi about 20 times and didn't do anything. So today I put exactly 1 person in timeout for only about 10 minutes. Thank you, Harry. I appreciate that. Maybe I misunderstood you. Do you think Saddam's hiding spot was good? Apparently not. What do you think about the protests in Sri Bijad right now? Don't know enough about them. Mercy. I'm sorry. Look how far we have advanced in the last 150 years. Yes, technological advance has been exponential since the Industrial Revolution compared to technological advances from the previous 4,000 years. What do you think about Vucic? Don't know enough about him. What's the longest running empire that is still running? Some would say the American. The British technically is still an empire. Osama's was pretty good. It was in the wrong country. The U.S. had the wrong country for the longest time. One of the other reasons that George W. Bush is a worse president than Woodrow Wilson, by the way. Well, Princeton has the Woodrow Wilson School of Foreign Affairs, which is a very good school. I know someone who went there. I don't think that's going to help the Woodrow Wilson argument here. And I've done my job. Well, thank you, Harry. Was the Horton 229 ever built to be put into production? I'm not sure. I'm not a maniac. Woodrow Wilson was pure evil and didn't have to do segregation. Didn't have to prop up the CKK with his beliefs, KKK, with his beliefs, didn't have to do any of that. And James Buchanan didn't have to try to force Kansas to accept a constitution they shouldn't have. James Buchanan did not have to let the states walk away. James Buchanan did not have to do any of that stuff that basically destroyed the country and led to an imminent civil war. History doesn't care about your feelings, but we here at the Friendly Neighborhood History do. Good night and love history. Hello, Simon. Yes, these guys are trying to disguise. Yes, I think they'd off protest a little too much. Best president is Alisha Isserbojovic. Thank you. You're catching the tail end, Simon. It's been what it always has been. People who don't like my opinions insisting that they know better than me, which is fine, they may, but then not insisting on not accepting my opinions even when I give clear reasons why. Do you think Vietnam was a good idea, and why did the Americans do it according to you? I think the Americans did it to prevent communism from spreading. It was the simple domino theory that communism would continue to spread throughout Asia if they did it. I think it was a terrible mistake. It was a war that the United States didn't ever really try to win. They could have won it, actually, if they had invaded the North, but they refused to do it until Nixon was president, and Nixon wasn't getting anywhere with it, so he pulled out. Technically, the United States did get what they wanted, but the North Vietnamese were never going to honor a South Vietnamese independence. Do you think we are coming to an end of this live stream? Yes. So please like and subscribe if you haven't. But James Buchanan and Andrew Johnson were side loyalty. They did all of this because they were part of a side. Woodrow Wilson had a lot of... Really? The side that splintered into two political parties in 1860. Woodrow Wilson had an out-of-touch, evil idea he brought into a world nobody wanted. I think of a lot of people in the South who wanted it. That's not fair, Hars. There's a lot of people who wanted the League of Nations. There's a lot of people who wanted segregated government. Woodrow Wilson was not just a maniac creating crazy ideas out of thin air. These ideas already existed. And by the way, guess who have been two people who have been perfectly fine with most of these ideas? James Buchanan and Andrew Johnson. You can't have a president like Woodrow Wilson without a president like Andrew Johnson. You can't have a president who's so openly racist without racial harmony being sabotaged by Lincoln's successor. And make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you. Vote for tomorrow's live stream lecture here on YouTube for whatever you would like. And yes, love Britain as you should. Hello from LA. Is your background Chinese or Japanese? These are Japanese geishas. So I wanted to go, I usually have a Western piece of historical art. I wanted to go Eastern here. And the geishas were highly educated, semi-equivalent to the Japanese samurai. My favorite president was LeBron. Yes. Yes, because if you can't be a good basketball player, if you can't be the best basketball player ever, be the best president ever. I hope someday fans have debates as passionate as this one about the lore of my works. I hope so too. I would love to read your works. Opinions on Bashar al-Assad? I mean, it's fun. It's crazy that he just up and ran to Putin. Hence, Woodrow Wilson was genuinely evil deep down in his heart, and Johnson and Buchanan weren't because they didn't make their own view over time. They had talking points. Andrew Johnson only accepted the 13th Amendment because he wanted to be elected to be vice president. Andrew Johnson pardoned the Confederate leaders who immediately became KKK leaders. There wouldn't have been a birth of a nation without Andrew Johnson. You haven't upset me, Guyan. This isn't about you. But it's your crazy uncles. I would also point out when I have a debate, it's usually for one live stream. Hearts has done the same thing for about 2 months. What? Are you serious? Okay, you're serious. You got to run for president. No one would vote for me. I'm too much of a moderate. I have this thing called the ability to critically think. And to look at the good in bad people and the bad in good people. No one wants it. They want someone to tell them what to think. I talk about the British Empire pretty much every week, pretty much every day. I'm sure you dream about it too, but I do talk about different parts of history. That's true. So does Harse. Give Harse credit. Harse asked about several different historical things, like the Ohio boys, the Ohio gang earlier. Farming, ooh, agricultural revolution, ancient history. I don't do enough of that. I like that, Simon. That's a good one. Problem is, it's so ancient that it wouldn't be a live lecture. I don't have a lot of sources to read. Au revoir. Very nice to meet you, Srinil. If I drink enough carrot juice, will I turn orange like Trump? I don't know if that's how he did it. I would try. Make sure to run for president. You would have to publish a manifesto and give your political opinion, so that's a good idea. Yeah, that's not going to happen. What is agrarianism? The study of agricultural patterns, culturally and economically. Please discuss the legacy of Nixon. Nixon is hated by many. There's a niche of people on the right who try to redeem Nixon and believe Nixon was framed. Nixon was a pretty effective presidential leader. He had some decent economic and foreign policy decisions. The Watergate scandal, his refusal to give up power and be honest with the American people destroyed his presidential legacy. Yes, I got Japanese women now. Yes. The mysteries of the Orient. Geishas used to be powerful like daimyo. Not as powerful as a daimyo. They were more like the samurai. And it was probably late 19th century they lost a lot of their power. The Meiji Restoration. Do you know Yugoslavia had a prison that was like Smith? That was like Smith, like Alcatraz? I believe it. So everybody vote for ancient Greece or get banned. That's funny. So are we reading as a book club Memoirs of a Geisha? If you guys become members and join and we can get members only chats and members only lives, then yes, we will do a book club. That'll be fun actually. Imagine getting your eyeglasses from Assad in Moscow right now. Oh jeez. What's up with the Taliban these days? They're just running Afghanistan, just like they did before the Americans went in there, which shows how bad George W. Bush was. I don't remember Woodrow Wilson losing a war, Hartsonet. I knew there wouldn't be a KKK without Andrew Johnson, but Johnson and Buchanan did everything for loyalty to a side and for power by them. But Wilson developed his view over time, and it was personal. Andrew Johnson owned slaves. You don't get more personal than that. A two-part system will always result in thrashing back and forth, which is why a monoparty is better. Yes, dictatorship, that's just great. I don't have the Reconquista. I don't have that one. Maybe we'll put that up for next week. That would be a good topic. Okay, jeez. Just don't punish anyone. Islam out of Europe, oh jeez. Nancy, good to see you. WTM, thank you for joining us. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. We went 10 minutes over just for you guys. Enjoyable conversation, if not a little irksome at times. I think my moderators just like seeing me upset. Yeah. This channel was not made in... I made... So, okay. I know what you're saying. I made this account in 2015. But I didn't make the YouTube start streaming or creating content until till last year. Yes, I am a Woodrow Wilson fanboy because I won't admit that he is worse than the Antichrist. Yes, that sounds like American politics right now. You don't agree with me, therefore you are the devil. Oriental Express implies the existence of an Occidental Express. That's funny, but there isn't one. I will check out Liam Payne's music. Thank you, Faye, for the suggestions and for being here. I'm going to sign off. Make sure to like and subscribe before you leave. Really appreciate everybody. Yes, might be partnered with Satan, not going to lie. I think you partnered with the false prophet to get ideas of how to pester me today. Yep. Yes. Okay. All right. Take care. I'll see you all again tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be doing a live stream lecture on whatever you guys vote for. We'll see. Maybe Woodrow Wilson. Maybe you'll actually hear me explain Woodrow Wilson in context. That's crazy. People deserve historical context. Or ancient Greece or any of the other topics. Take care. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great Saturday. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern.